Hello guys, welcome to this second video about functions. We are going to see how we can call a function within another function. To do so, we'll be doing this code, we'll be doing this question. So let's understand the question. Write a function which will be telling the student his or her intake and its starting date once the student provides his student code. Okay, when the student provides his student code, if he is in the first intake, our function will be telling him the first intake starts on 1st July. If he is in the second intake, the second intake starts 1st September. Third intake, the third intake starts 1st November. And the output, okay, that's what I was saying, the output must look like this one. Dear Hugo Javes, you are eligible for the second intake. Class will start on 1st September 2022. So to do so, let's start. First, I need to show you the table I'm using. Let me show the table I'm using. Okay, this is the table I'm using. This one, I'm using a table called students. It has these columns and what we'll be using just students code. This one, when the student enters this code, student first name and last name, because this one, Dear Hugo Javes, is these two are the first and last name. You can see it here for this code, Hugo and Javes, and then you're eligible for the second intake. This one will come from the function we created previously, so that's why we need to follow my previous video about functions, the one where we did this one. The video of allocating, the function was to allocate intake. We'll be calling this function. This function was allocating intake for a student when he enters his code, and they allocated the available intakes were this one: first intake, second intake, and third intake. Good. Hello. For this one, we'll be using these three values, either first, second, or third. If you are in first intake, our function will tell you that intake will start on 1st July, second intake on 1st September, third intake on 1st November. Okay, and then second in Dear Hugo Javes, you are eligible for the second intake. Class will start on 1st September 2022. This is how our function, our answer must look. Good. So let's start coding. Create or replace function. Let's call our function assign starting date. Starting date. Our function will have a parameter, and we'll be using the student code as the parameter, since the student has to specify to enter his code before receiving anything. Let's call that variable code, and then student dot studcode. Studcode is the column of student code. You can see it. Percentage type. Okay, after that we need to specify the return type. Since our function will be returning a date, the return type will be date, and then is begin and end, and what, and student, and assign starting date. Let's say as assign in text at starting date. Intake starting date, so that it will be meaningful. Okay, now we need to declare some variables. The first variable we need to declare is this one, the one which will be holding this date, and it will be the one which our function will be returning. Let's call it start date. This is the variable that our function will be returning. We need to give it the data type of the return type. Its data type must be the return type of the function. And then here, so that we will not forget, let's return the variable good. Let's start with our three conditions. If intake equals to first intake, if intake equals to first intake, then what will be the next? Then start date will be equals to, or it will be equal to this one, this date. Start date equal to, start date equals to this date, and this date must be in single quote. Good. And then else if intake equals to second intake. Second intake. What will be the output? Start date will be equals to, it will be equal to 1st September. Another condition is this one. In case of the intake equals to the third intake, let's put that condition. If intake equals to third intake, the starting date will be 1st November 2022. So let's put an else, so that in case of the starting date, no, the intake is not among these three conditions, means that the student is not registered. TBMS output dot put line tell the students you are not registered. You are not registered. And then let's end if. Good. So let's try to run this code and see what will be the output. But so far, not that we didn't yet code the function. show errors, show error, intake, good, very good error. I wanted to have this error so that it will explain us very good how why we need to create to call the function. We need to call the function, the one we created in the previous video. I think I've already watched that video. So we need to call this function, and this function has the parameter of code. So when we'll be calling this function, we'll be entering the student code as the argument. And another thing to know is that this one, good. Now you want to call this function. Okay, I was saying that nothing to note is that according to the error we did, we had to have also to declare this variable. So let's declare the variable called intake, and then its data type must be the return type of the function we want to call. And the return type of that function is varchar, because this function will be returning a varchar. This one, first intake, second intake, third intake. That's why even our variable that will be holding the return value of that function must also be a varchar. Varchar, let's say 20. And here we say this one, intake equals to the name of the function. I've said that function will be having the code, the student's code, as the argument, according to what we did in the previous video. So now we can run the code, and I think it will not have any error. Hope so. Good. There is no error. Function created. Let me show you. Good. Function created. Okay. So now let's call the function. We created the function. Let's call the function. In PLSQL, when we call the function, needs to write a block. Declare, begin, and end. We want to call this function just to see if our conditions are met. Let's call the function. Let's declare a variable which will be the argument, and varchar. It will be varchar. Varchar. And this variable will be holding a value which will come from the user. It will be a user input. Good. After that, we also need another variable that will be holding our result. In that variable, we must have the same data type as the return type of the function we are creating. The return type of our function is date. That's why this variable also must be a date. We must have a date data type. After that, let's now call the function result equals to what? Equals to the name of the function, and then we pass as code as parameter. This one is the, put it here, it becomes the argument of our function, and then let's print the result. let's print the results. We print here results. Good. Let's run this code and see what will be the output. Enter code. Can you see? Good. Enter code. Let's take the one we have in the question, this one, because it exists in our code, in our table. Okay, 1st September 02. It must be 1st September, it must be 2022. 22, not 02. 1st September 22. First September 2022. And this one, not 02, but 22. Good. Okay, now we know that our function is returning the dates correctly. So now let us insert all these details: the first name, the last name, the intake, so that our outputs will look like this one. Okay, how will we do so? First thing, we need to declare the first, because we use the first name and the last name, and we don't have these two variables in our code. Let us declare these variables. Let's say first name. First name will be with the same data type with the first name of our table, the first name column of our table. Student, it's still first name, and then percentage type. Last name, we also declare a variable called last name. It will also have the same data type with the still last name column of our table. Good. So now let's come here. If the intake is first intake, then start date will be 1st July 2022, and the BMS output line will print what? I'm going to print these things. Dear Hugo, dear first name, dear first name, and put a space, last name, dear first name, last name. After that, we put this one: you are eligible for the intake. Dear first name, last name, you are eligible for the intake. Maybe first intake. For this one, it's first intake. You just take the variable intake, you put it here. You are eligible for the intake, and then after that, we will have a semicolon. This is in single quote, that's why you have to put all these things. Class will start on start date. Class will start on start date. Good. Now it's okay. Good. And then we put this line for the second intake. It should not change, to be the same. And for the third intake. That's good. And then we run again the code. Let's run the code. Good. Oh, I just selected without copying. Copy and then here paste. There is an error, show error. Show error. We didn't select. Right. We come here. Can you see this error? Student first name must be declared. Student last name must be declared. And then it ignores some statements. Why? Because we didn't select. We are just using these things of students first name, students last name, but we didn't declare them. At line 6. What is line 6? This one. Oh, this one, it's not even because of select. We didn't put here the S. Here there is S. It's students. It's not students. It's not one student. This is not the correct name of the table. You must have an S there. And then another one. We didn't. Did you select something? No. Let me show you which error we may have here. Because I think we still have an error. I want us to see it so that if you first see it in other exercises, maybe it can. Okay, there is no error, there is not any error. Good. But so far this code is not good because we didn't specify the first name, the ID of the first name and the last name. This code can be created, but when will be, let me show you so that I will not be a theoretic man. Let me be practical. If you call it, it will give us an error. Let's call it. Let's put this, the reg number, as we did previously. Only. Okay. There is no name. You are eligible for the second intake. Class will start on. Good. Where there is no name here. Okay, that's what I wanted us to have. It's a logical error and it doesn't give us what we wanted. We didn't have what we wanted to have. We didn't have the first name and last name. So we should start by doing this one. Select what stu f name. This is the column. We select it into first name. This is the variable. The first name is variable from. We put the name of the table, students. Where we put the condition stu code equals to code. Good. And then we do the same for the last name. Last name in here also. Last name. I prefer to put it here. Good. Okay. Now let's run the code again and see if it will give us the first name and the last name. Let's run the calling part. Enter code. Do you have the code? Let us take the code from the question. Enter code. Good. Let's see. Okay. Dear Hugo Javes, you are eligible for the second intake. Class will start on 1st September 2022. But can you see this one? It's not the part of our question. So how do we, where do we have it? And why can we keep it? We don't need to keep it because it's not the part of our question, and it comes from where? From this one. To see when we checked if our function was working correctly, we printed the result. But now we don't need to print the result again because we have the result here in start date. So this line must be removed or commented. Good. So now this is for this one give us for the second intake. Let's run for the first and the third intake. First and third intake. We need to know the code. Let's do this one. Let's just to change the code, the student's code. Dear Rick Tan, you are eligible for the third intake. Class will start on 1st November 2022. Good. Now let's run another one. You may be eligible for this one is second intake, this one is third intake. So let's now look the one of first intake. I think the roll number of 7 is for the first intake. Good. Dear Don Juan, you are eligible for the first intake. Class will start on 1st July 2022. Okay, good. This is how we can do this question. Thank you. Don't forget, this is how we called the function in another function here. This line calls this function. Don't forget that one. That was the great purpose of the video. So thank you guys.